This is an RNZ podcast.
22 and a half minutes to 9 is the time, and that means it is Midweek Mediawatch o'clock. Colin Peacock, the man himself, joins me from our studio in Wellington. Colin, kia ora to you.
Kia ora. I'm here.
Oh, I thought there was an upwards intonation there, Colin, and I thought that you were going to say something.
No, that's right. Just announcing myself.
Emil.
I try to do it a different way every week.
You do,
just to keep you on your toes.
I appreciate the variety. Variety is the spice of life.
Yeah.
All right, lots of media news this week, Colin. Stuff fought the law, and it's a draw. The police commissioner has said the police will not prosecute Stuff for publishing audio of the police pursuit of Tom Phillips, but that it could have done. We won't, but we could have.
That's right. So maybe they would both say they won rather than it being a draw or a tense standoff or something like that.
Yeah.
But so this relates to back on the 11th of September, Stuff on its website published a small section. In fact, I just got it up on my phone just to see if it was there. So it's labelled like this, Police Watch, because a kind of audio video clip they put up. Watch. Police audio from the end of Tom Phillips chase. It says, police radio captures a small part of the tense end to the Tom Phillips chase. And fatal end as we now know it. Officers' voices have been altered, it says, and a short section removed to protect their identities. So at the time, the police complained that they thought this was a breach of the Radio Communications Act. Stuff said there's public interest. We stand by what we did there, and we did it judiciously. So today, in what was described, I think, on the RNZ site as dueling opinion pieces, there was a piece published by, several media, actually, but RNZ ran them together. Mm-hmm. So Police Commissioner Richard Chambers saying, yes, we could have prosecuted. We are still of the legal opinion that there was a clear breach of the Radio Communications Act. But we see little benefit in dragging this through the courts, which is to achieve our main aim, which is that there be no repeat. But the police commissioner warns, should this happen again, this position on the option of any legal action may change. And the police commissioner, is adamant that the public interest would have been better served by withholding the material.
That claim that publishing this audio jeopardised the investigation, at the time, I recall some people found that a bit unconvincing. Did he elaborate on how it would have jeopardised the investigation? Yeah,
he did. There were three things. He said, look, the reasons for not publishing this was it distressed my staff who attended that night and their families, would have distressed the family of Tom Phillips to hear this kind of as live audio. And then he said the potential impact on its the release of it in that way could have had on the investigations that he said were underway. And he's absolutely insistent it wasn't because that there was anything in the audio that could have embarrassed the police or cast them in a negative light. It wasn't a sort of reputation management thing. So, yeah, this thing, could it have jeopardised an investigation? He says there's a process that follows a critical incident. The officers are stood down for 10 days for their welfare. They can't be interviewed about their recollections of that critical incident until that 10 days is up. And then when they're interviewed, he says it's critical that they give their own recollections and not a recollection that might have been altered by something they heard subsequently or from something they'd seen in the media. So he says in a statement, until they are interviewed as part of the investigation, they're told not to discuss it. So he adds there's the wider issue, like separate from just this one critical incident, the chilling effect that it could have on law enforcement officers' ability to communicate freely. So I guess what he's saying there is, if police officers see this and it happens 2 or 3 times, every time they're in this live situation, in the back of their minds, they're worried about what will this sound like if it gets published in the media. If it gets published,
right. All right, well, that's Richard Chambers' perspective. The other opinion piece that you refer to, Stuff's response, what was the meat and potatoes of that?
Yeah, so that's Stuff's editor-in-chief, Keith Lynch, who at the time defended it and still does. So you can read both of these so-called dueling opinion pieces in one place on RNZ's site that were published earlier today. So he says, we remain confident we didn't breach any laws. We have proactively communicated as much to police at the time. He said, we strongly disagree that we would have caused distress to the police or their families or the Phillips family, or that the publication could have impacted any investigations underway. He still says the circumstances of this particular case mean it was wholly in the public interest to air that audio. And he reiterates they were careful to ensure there was nothing that could identify the officers or nothing that would cause harm or identify the Phillips children, which is, of course, a separate sort of legal prohibition on that. He said we didn't sensationalise the audio, albeit, as I referred to it, there was a fairly bold heading urging you to kind of watch and play the video.
It's kind of par for the course. And
yeah, that is standard presentation of a kind of video audio file I want you to pay attention to. So, yeah, that's true. He said we spent time verifying this information. And we published it judiciously. And he says that was in stark contrast to what was occurring on social media platforms at the time. Now, I don't think that's going to convince police or any lawyers that might have looked at this, because there he's talking about what other people were doing. And as far as I know, people were publishing unverified rumours, but no one was sourcing stuff from this, this police audio. And, this is something that newsrooms have done for a long, long time. They've had monitoring of police communications and radio frequencies, and the kind of convention, I guess, is that they could use it for information, for tips, and for verification of things, but not that they could go and publish the contents.
Which is very interesting, that this convention, isn't it? It's sort of, so if you hear something on police radio saying there's been a car crash outside 100 Great North Road, you shouldn't, according to that convention, then jump in the news car and speed down to 100 Great North Road. You should call the police and say anything to report about a crash somewhere in Auckland, and they might say, yeah, there's been a crash at 100 Great North Road, and then you can. Is that how it works?
Pretty much. That's a good scenario there, and I think the guts of it is that might not be illegal. Kind of distinction, but it's the convention that it's like embargoes and things like that, where the media released information on the expectation that they'll handle it in the same way that they always have, and off the record, I suppose, revelations would be, or anonymous revelations would be a similar sort of thing. But interestingly, One News tonight on TVNZ, Simon Merset reported on this. They'd asked Professor Ursula Chia from Canterbury University, so leading media law.
My old media law professor, Chair, wonderful woman.
Well, there we go. That's where you get your ethics from. That's good. She reckoned that stuff did break the law in terms of the Radio Communications Act, and it wouldn't be a defence for them to say they didn't think that they were, which isn't quite what they're saying, but they're saying that the public interest justified it. But yeah, there isn't really a public interest defence, I think, in this instance. So I guess, will be pleased that the police have not seen fit to draw a line in the sand and drag them into court over it. But yeah, very interesting to see what would happen if this did happen again, or whether this statement by the police commissioner and the stance he's taking has the desired effect as far as they're concerned, that it doesn't ever happen again.
Yeah, there might be some disappointed media lawyers around after that.
Maybe. Everybody loves a president.
All right, let's talk about a story that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks here on Midweek Mediawatch. Last week we talked about Netball NZ reinstating Dame Noeline Taurua. But it still wasn't clear why she'd been stood down from the Silver Ferns, and she's been talking in the media this week.
Yeah, in fact, on Monday, it was a very intense
big day.
Media blitz. And I know you talked about this on Monday in your Monday sports slot with Richard Urban, and I think you used the phrase, there was a weird omerta about this, that we still don't know what it is that prompted the within the squad, or what Dame Noeline might have done to prompt these complaints. Richard talked about NDAs at dawn, non-disclosure agreements, and I reckon that's absolutely the heart of it. At one point you mentioned to him that we'd been talking about it, and you said, I've been talking to Colin Peacock, and then straight after that Richard said something, I've been talking about these issues with a proper journalist as well. I was sitting there thinking,
it wasn't about you.
None taken, but no, I think he was being self-deprecating about himself. Yeah. But he knows his stuff, of course. He worked for New Zealand Cricket, probably other roles in sport as well. So of course he knows exactly what he's talking about. So from a media point of view, though, yeah, you're right. It's just such a frustrating story. We still don't know. So on Monday, Dame Noeline came out, did a huge run of morning interviews. I think more than the Prime Minister actually does in one stint. There was Morning Report, the Mike Hosking breakfast, 9 to noon, TVNZ breakfast, 3 News made by Stuff, and I saw also On the Crowd Goes Wild that night, all sit-down interviews on camera. So, yeah, so in fact, a couple of them overlapped, and she ended up bailing on Mike Hosking on News Talk ZB.
Hey, Mike.
Yes?
I'm on breakfast show, but I'm happy to come back after I finish the breakfast show.
Okay, sure, we can do that. Let it.
I've been ushered out to somewhere else, but I'm happy to come back. Kerry, sorry listeners, Kerry will make contact with you to organise a time, hopefully today, this morning, then you can ask me more questions.
All right, I'd love to. Nice to talk. Appreciate it. Dame Noeline Taurua, slightly odd end, but we might get it back on after the Prime Minister if you got a couple. I had a couple more questions left.
That's interesting. He took it in his stride.
He did, yeah, absolutely did. And she did. She did phone back and he did ask those questions, which were interesting, and we'll come to that. But when the interview started, it was quite funny because she began it very bright and breezy, thanking Mike Hosking for keeping the home fires burning, who was basically being on her side, which he certainly was. And when his producer, Glenn Hart, made his kind of daily wrap-up podcast of the show, he kind of reflected on that in the contrast with her bailing out for another show, which was TVNZ's breakfast program. He seemed to have gone right off her.
So she wanted to go and appear on a show that's got about a fifth of the audience that we do, and thought that it was cool to this. So she hasn't really told us anything, and she snubbed us for a less popular show. I don't know if I actually like you that much anymore, Noeline. Sorry, Dame Noeline.
I mean, tongue firmly in cheek there. I think that was a funny little wrap up. Yeah.
Indeed. I'm guessing that she went on this media blitz, Dame Noeline Taurua, with the approval of Netball NZ, but the story still didn't quite match up, did they? Yeah, because
you'd assume that once they'd reinstated her, down the track anyway, after this Northern tour, that they'd be on the same page of saying we're moving on, we've got a process, and we've kind of brought agreement about what had happened and what they had agreed to. But over and over, Dame Noeline kept saying she wanted to air her truth while making it clear there was some things she could not say, and even admitting when pressed that there had been disclosures she'd agreed not to disclose, the NDAs at dawn, as Richard Irvin put it on Monday. And, I think that kind of dropped Netball New Zealand in it big time, because with both parties saying so little about what had actually happened. Here is actually how TVNZ's sportscaster Andrew Saville summed it up on his sort of, I think they call it Monday morning quarterback slot with Mike Hosking on ZB.
Wow. We want the truth, but it seems Netball believes we can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
Quite odd, really.
Was odd, eh?
That Dame Noeline Taurua wouldn't know what she's done wrong, and there was no investigation.
But hold on, Netball NZ insisted that there was an investigation. Maybe that wasn't the word that they used.
Yeah, well, that was
review.
When Dame Noeline rang back in to the Mike Hosking breakfast, that was the thing he said. He said, "Are you seriously telling me there was no investigation?" She said, "Correct." And he pressed her on that. But then Netball New Zealand later issued a statement later in the day on behalf of Dame Noeline. So at this point they seem to be, yes, on the same page and speaking with one voice, but saying, yeah, there was one, but she wasn't told about the precise allegations against her. And this goes back to what we talked about last week, in order to protect the privacy of the players involved, which on one level is sensible because they still want to play for the squad. They don't want to be singled out, or they want to move on from it.
Might be a breach of their employment contract.
Yep,
privacy.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. So I mean, still incredibly messy media-wise, and we're still all, as the public and the media, in that position of going, what on earth has prompted this, and that it still can't be resolved after all these months?
It is quite I guess maybe the public feels that, if you're an athlete or a high-profile person in a high-profile position, then maybe a different set of employment laws apply to you, but they don't, I suppose. And yet it doesn't quench the public's appetite for wanting to know what happened, which in this case is kind of simple, right? What did she do that upset two or more players and caused her suspension? Exactly,
yeah. And I think the closest, we got to that in that huge round of media interviews on the Monday. Ollie Ritchie on 3 News, I think he got closest when he asked her this.
Did any players come to you and say, Noeline, I have an issue with this, Noeline, I don't like this, Noeline, I don't agree with this? Did any players raise concerns with you personally?
So just so you know, in our environment, I have monthly meetings with our leadership group where we always talk about areas that we can improve on, and then what that needs to be in regards to implementation.
So
we're going to be talking about plain language a little bit later on, Colin, and that feels resonant here.
Yeah, well, this morning, actually, Mike Hosking was talking about this again on his ZB program and saying, just apropos of nothing, saying, the way they speak about process and environment and all of that, he was saying you'd really lose the will to carry on working, wouldn't you, if you were at Netball New Zealand or on that board or whatever. He's just musing a lot, but I had to say I agreed with him when all the verbiage added up with so little precision. And you think the reason those words are used about environments and processes because they kind of don't mean anything specific in the end. Yeah. But that was not a kind of direct answer from Dame Noeline where she said, we had these. She said, what happened? What upset them? He said, well, we have this process. We talk. Nothing came up in the monthly review. So we're still back in the same position.
All along, it's probably, well, by my estimation anyway, public support, it seems, has been on the side of Dame Noeline Taurua, and maybe the support of some media and journalists as well. What do you make of that? Do you think it has been the coverage fair and in balance, given, I suppose, maybe there are some frustrations at the lack of forthrightness as well?
Well, there's that. There's definitely that. But in the light of that, I think media should be more annoyed that they haven't had much more to go on to make a judgment. So I think it does feel a little unfair to me that some have assumed that the kind of, the bureaucrats, the backroom people at Netball New Zealand have somehow messed this up, and that an effective and popular coach has, for reasons no one understands, been stood down, and that feels unfair. So kind of natural that some people would reach that conclusion, but it still feels like we're not operating on a full set of facts. We know in high-performance sport, just think of cycling, New Zealand, and the things that have gone wrong there, right up to Olivia Podmore. We know that this stuff does need to be handled properly when there's a problem. I think the football fans had a coach that was very unpopular, and there was a almost player revolt, which played a part in that coach departing the scene. So these things have to be handled properly. Deborah Peed, the PR professional and frequent media voice, she was on the Herald Now show saying, and her comments ended up leading ZB's news that this was a PR disaster for netball. But she also said, you don't mess with a dame. And that felt just wrong to me.
Right,
that just someone cares a title or a status. It doesn't mean they're right, Prince Andrew. So I know it's not the same situation, but you can't just assume that. But she was not the only one, to be fair to her, that actually said that actually referenced the fact that she was a dame and that somehow, this gave her a status that shouldn't be messed with.
The argument from authority.
That was weird.
All right, let's talk about NBR, shall we? The National Business Review, which this is a really interesting story, I think. The NBR has reached settlements with 3 big corporate customers for what it describes as the illegal stealing of its content.
Yeah, and you wouldn't likely, would you, threaten to prosecute your own customers. And NBR has actually, its owner Todd Scott has not been averse to doing this. He's changed the business around from a kind of paper publication to one that really depends on.
I like what they've done here, NBR.
Yeah, paid subscribers, very little, well, no advertising at all. And yeah, so and there are tiered levels of sponsors. So if you're of subscription, so if you're a big company, you'll be buying a subscription, paying more if you're expecting a lot of people to log in and use it.
Yeah, you can't just buy one copy of the article and then share it 1,000 times.
Yep. Correct.
Is the theory, right?
Which is evidently what people were doing. So Todd Scott called this a friendly warning shot for impacted customers. So he knew that some of them were doing it because of the systems they have in place to detect copying and multiple uses and log-ons and all of that. And he said this was a breach of NBR's copyright and subscription terms. He said, following our investigations, NBR last week secured settlements from 2 leading fund managers and 1 national law firm, which is interesting that they were threatening legal action against a law firm. Each firm has paid costs and agreed to buy, it's an interesting outcome, the appropriate number of subscriptions. So it worked.
So this is all about sort of illicit password sharing, the Netflixization perhaps of of the news.
Yeah.
Do you think will other publishers be taking notice of this?
Do
you think?
Absolutely, and Todd Scott actually made that point in the statements he made that there are others who stuff the Herald. They all have paywalls, even publications the size of Ashburton Guardian have paywalls now, and some who have like trade publications, things like that, have abandoned print publications as well as a print option. as NBR has done, they will definitely be looking at this. And also, if you think of like magazine publishers, for example, North and South, they've been in the news. Their current owners trying to get that back up and running as both a print and a digital publication. If they find the costs are too great and they want to, do a digital only option, this sort of thing might really help them if it can serve as a precedent. Because, as we said before, it stands or falls on clients paying for subscriptions. There's no other significant stream of income for. But clients might be thinking, when it was a paper copy, like if they've been buying it for years, and the NBR not that long ago, I think prior to 2020, was available as a paper publication. You could buy one copy, and it could be read by hundreds of people.
But not simultaneously.
Library. No, of course, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Business Desk, I just double checked this actually, but Business Desk, if you try to copy paste something from Business Desk, when you try to paste it, a message appears which writes, "You have copied copyrighted material from Business Desk. This is a breach of our terms and conditions. Please consider a group subscription or forward a link to upgrade your account. Here's the email address."
Yeah.
Which is interesting, isn't it?
It certainly is. And the co-editors of the NBR, Hamish and Kelly Dementa Stewart, Hamish, they both wrote basically a message to their subscribers saying, for this to work properly, we've had to close the gaps in our security. We're explaining why we've done it. He said communications managers at various corporates like to hold one subscription and copy the relevant NBR item, paste the content into emails, or make a PDF of it. That's why they put in the digital tools to close that off, which they know runs the risk of annoying their customers, who are, of course, absolutely critical to their ongoing success. But they also make the point that they've had articles repurposed elsewhere. They've referred to them as hallucinations, and things like X, formerly Twitter's AI Grok, wrongly naming an NBR rich lister as someone involved in, child sexual exploitation. That story, went out as potentially embarrassing to the NBR, but it was clearly wrong. And they're saying that's the danger of text getting stripped out of PDFs and emails and ending up in the wrong context and being basically mispublished, and you could end up with a huge legal problem. And they also make the point there are digital avenues like Facebook or LinkedIn where they can be shared, and there is the opportunity for them to get subscribers and share the content in the proper way.
Hamish McNichol is the name of the co-editor of the NBR. Great stuff. Colin Peacock.
I was going to say Mackenzie, but he's the Substack.
There you go.
Yes. Wouldn't want to make that mistake.
Hamish is all over the place.
Yes, indeed.